of many generations, seeds of life divine. We are not alone, earth names us, past and present, peoples near and far, family and friends and strangers, show us who we are. Therefore let us make thanksgiving, and with justice willing and aware, give to earth and all things living liturgies of care. Let us lay our house of welcome, living stone upholding living stone, gladly showing all our neighbors we are not our own.
Hello, welcome to this virtual service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Waynesboro. Viola Abbott has written, "We are Unitarian Universalists. When we lift up our 7 principles, some of us think of them as a form of theology, but they are more important to our collective than that. They do not tell us what we should believe, they tell us how we should be. They tell us how we should act in a larger world and with each other. It has been a long and sometimes unforgiving road to today, but we are here today because we are mindful of that past and because we have hope for the future. We want the practice of this faith to be a fulfilling manifestation of its promise." This congregation values diversity and the march towards justice, even as we sometimes fall short of living the fullness of that promise. We are here not because we are perfect, but because we believe it is both possible and necessary to move ourselves and the world toward ever-growing justice, dignity, and inclusion. Thank you for joining us in this virtual service. My name is Lauren Nash, and I grew up in this church and cherish this community for its inclusivity and openness. Let us kindle the chalice of our hearts with these words. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals. Open your hearts. Seek new ways of understanding. Come, let us worship together.
Our words of prayer this morning are by Tamara Lebac. God of many names, you who has endowed us with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, let us remember this day that in this country there is no national religion, there is no superior race, there is no preferable gender or orientation. We gather holding a common value, that the glory of this country rests first and foremost on its diversity. Out of many ideas, out of many beliefs, out of many views, out of many voices, out of many passions, out of many experiences, we are one. Help us, O God, to never forget that we need not be alike to live and love alike. We ask for forgiveness this day for our national and individual transgressions when we have chosen inaction or silence in the face of injustice and abuse of power, and our failure to claim our own power. We ask for forgiveness for the times when we have not known our neighbor, fed our hungry, or equipped our future generation with knowledge and love. We ask for a blessing on this nation according to our own faith and forms, and pledge our voice in support of moving closer and closer to freedom. We pray these prayers of our hearts in the names of those who have come before and those who are yet to be, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. We come together each week, a caring community willing to hear each other in our joys and our sorrows, the things that are meaningful in our lives, and to give voice, give joy, and receive support as needed. Paul Rabinowitz writes this week, "My nephew is feeling better. You know how I know he is feeling better? He was answering my calls when he was feeling lousy. The last time I called, I got his message machine. No, really, he is feeling better. My family let me know." Charlotte Schneider writes, "So glad for the beautiful weather that I can do gardening. With all the destructive things happening around us, it's helpful to focus on what's good, like family and friends. It's also heartening to see some of the police are supporting the protesters." Cynthia Thompson writes, "I'm sad about Virginia Edwards' passing, but I am so grateful for the friendship we were able to enjoy before she moved to Birch Gardens. I hope you and Walter are holding up well, even while our present state of affairs is abysmal. Ironically, the protests are giving me hope that things will finally change. I look forward to seeing you in person." Let us hold these joys and sorrows and all that remain unspoken, unshared, and perhaps unknown, together in our hearts quietly.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, 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 I know. I know, 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 I know this rose will this rose I know my fear, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear, I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. Unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. Unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open, 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 fear will open. I know my soul will unfold its wings. I know this rose will open.
Good morning. This is a reading by Trumbles, who is a Vietnamese-American comic book writer and illustrator working out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Dear liberal allies, you and I learned very different things in very different ways. If you didn't live an experience, then step aside. We students of color, gay students, trans students, children of immigrants and refugees knew this stuff before our professors told us what to call it. We learned it from the bottom up. You learned it a different way. You received a set of key words and a list of definitions. Your learning was, in all likelihood, here is this word. This is what this word means. For you, it was xenophobia, a strong fear or dislike of people from other countries. For us, it was xenophobia, the time that boy in my kindergarten class spat on me because I couldn't speak English yet. Or when I saw that clerk yell at my mom in the grocery store because her English wasn't clear enough. For you, it was racism, unfair treatment of people who belong to another race, violent behavior towards them. For us, it was racism. That one time I saw the manager tell that sales girl to follow my dad around at Kohl's. Or that time my neighbor's kid got shot by the police and they tried to cover it up by convincing everyone he was in a gang because he was a Hmong, but we knew he wasn't. Or the time my dad told me I shouldn't rollerblade to the library because I'm not white and it's not safe. For you, it was homophobia, a strong dislike or fear of homosexual people. For us, it was homophobia. That time in the 6th grade when Ryan shoved me against a glass door and banged my face in it while yelling "faggot" at me until the teacher stopped him. Or when my Catholic high school's president told me that, though he loved me as a child of God, he still believed I was sinful. For you, it was classism, prejudice or discrimination based on social class. For us, it was classism, the time when my best friend came over to hang out, and her parents didn't want her to come over again because they didn't like our neighborhood. Or that one time when my friends had no idea what food stamps looked like and I was too embarrassed to explain what they were. So while you were learning that these academically framed phenomena were real problems, we were getting figurative name tags for awful things that we already knew. Your weekly vocabulary list was, to us, just a hollow shadow of our lived experiences. When you step out of class, you get to say, "Oh, awesome! I'm learning how to be a good ally and a better human being. This will help me." For us, it's more like, "Ah, so that's what they're calling it nowadays." When exactly did they say change was going to come for us?
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
How to speak to the world that is around us at this time. The Psalms form a part of scriptural tradition that holds a significant place in both Judaism and Christianity and spreads over into broader culture sometimes. Psalms provide words of comfort for many situations. Perhaps most famously, the 23rd Psalm is frequently heard at funerals and memorials. Even people who have no belief in God or who believe that no God there may be would actually interact and intervene so directly on behalf of an individual person. Yet the tradition of the words can still bring some comfort. The Psalms include laments, rage against one's enemies, even revenge fantasies, ecstasy, praise, and wonder. Such a broad range of human emotions with little filter other than the standards of the lyrical form itself. These are all present in this amazing ancient prayer book from a culture and religious outlook quite different from what most of us, maybe any of us, holds today. Psalm 17 asks for protection from enemies with these words: "Hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who are out to destroy me, from my mortal enemies who surround me. They close up their callous hearts, and their mouths speak with arrogance. They have tracked me down. They now surround me with eyes alert to throw me to the ground. They are like a lion hungry for prey, like a fierce lion crouching in cover." The imagery of being thrown to the ground caught the attention and captured the heart of Alden Solovey, who wrote this contemporary psalm titled "Strangled by Police," Psalm of Protest 17. A psalm of protest in memory of George Floyd, sung at the gates of justice when black men are strangled in the streets, when power is abused and jails overflow, when the voiceless are forgotten and minorities misused. Open, you gates, open to the cries of those murdered, jailed, or harassed for being black, for being a person of color, for being homeless, indigent, destitute, or unwanted. The detained, the hounded, pursued and persecuted, who are killed while being restrained. Open, you gates, let righteousness flow forth like living waters, and truth flow forth as a healing balm, to still the hand of violence and hatred, to cure the heart of bigotry and racism, to herald fairness and equality, and bring justice to the land. Perhaps our various institutions have now been trained by COVID-19 with every other day for a couple of months a new message from businesses giving us health advice and demonstrating their commitment to protect us, where usually they would just send us a business notice. But I never in a million expected to receive the message from Citibank I got this past week. In the context of reassuring customers that even though some of their banking outlets had sustained damage in the outpouring of grief and rage in response to the murder of George Floyd and the many others in the endless stream of police violence as a locus of structural, institutionalized racism. In that massive context, that painful context, Citibank used words from the CEOs and presidents of their various constituent branches to make a stand for justice. From their message, these words: I hope you know that Citi is an organization that champions equality, diversity, and inclusion, and is willing to stand up for those values when they are threatened. Our leaders have shared their thoughts on this very important issue, which we want to share now. Quote, the tragic and unnecessary death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the ensuing unrest are glaring reminders of the progress we need to make to have a truly equal and just society. Mike Corbett, Citi CEO. Quote, we must use this painful time as the turning point to a better future that embraces our common good by listening, learning, and being committed to taking action to create a more equal and just society. Jane Fraser, President of Citi and CEO of Global Consumer Banking. Now, if I hadn't already known, I would have learned in business school that corporations understand themselves as having only one actual responsibility: to increase shareholder value. We don't have to pretend that these statements are not public relations and advertising to recognize that all the same something extraordinary is going on here. It is the same something extraordinary that has led to numerous demonstrations for racial justice, for racial equity right here in Waynesboro and Stanton over the past week and a half. And more demonstrations are scheduled for the next week and beyond. Who would have expected that? Here, new groups have sprung up, pointing to justice. Even here in the Valley, people are yearning for justice. In Laura Riggins' amazing newsletter article this week, you read first about the convergence of the perfect storm around us now, resembling the times of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, the Great Depression of the 1930s, the great civil unrest of the late 1960s, yearning for change, yearning for things to be renewed and different and just, and the historically disastrous presidency of Andrew Johnson, all rolled up into sudden storm that threatens any sense of security we may have gathered around us if we were lucky. While protesters against progress and justice gathered in the vacant parking lot of Waynesboro Kmart this past Thursday, and counter-protesters promoting justice and equity opposite them, the whole world is rumbling with the possibility of change. Not change yet, really. Not fully, definitely, but possibility. Those of us who have been engaged with learning to support our yearning for justice for varying lengths of time have too often taken for granted that everyone really already knows about such things as white privilege and white fragility and institutionalized racism and systemic racism and white supremacy and all the other terms that give shape to our hopes for justice and equity, that give shape to our action to support those hopes. All the ways racism is not primarily a personal attitude or individual action, but a system of oppression. But not everyone does know. Not even everyone who has had enough exposure that we think they should know. And so Jimmy Kimmel, a late night comedian, gave a very basic lesson on white privilege to those who did not know yet, instead of giving us something to laugh at last week. Missives from various religious organizations encourage some very simple steps as starting points. Two that are hardest, perhaps, for white people, for people who have relative systemic privilege, are be quiet and listen to the voices, opinions, desires, and plans of the oppressed. And then follow the leadership of African Americans and people of color. Now is not the time to express your great idea or to correct someone else's less than perfect idea in your view. It is a time to really hear, perhaps for the first time to hear, the voices of people systemically silenced. It is always true and has always been true that love listens, never more than now. In local papers, columns and letters from local Christian ministers, some quite good, others notably flawed, are calling for something new, a truer expression of their religious values, and organizations who have been beating the drum for justice for longer are pointing the way to systemic change. For example, calling people of faith to engage officials in Washington to push for federal level change in policing and police training and record keeping nationwide. Policing is very local, but much funding for policing comes from the federal level, and Congress has the power of the purse and can do something meaningful about changing policing everywhere in this country. So stay attuned and watch for real opportunities that may push you out of your comfort zone into the area of justice. This is a time of possibility if we will only take it. So let our benediction today be, open, you gates, let righteousness flow forth as living waters and truth flow forth as healing balm, to still the hand of violence and hatred, to cure the heart of bigotry and racism, to herald fairness and equality, and bring justice to the land. Now go. Do your part. Play your role to make it so for all. Amen, and blessed be.